I have come here to chew bubblegum and
Talk books.
and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk books, horror, literary, classics, and contemporary. In this video, my top 10 best horror books of the 21st century, starting from the year 2000, based solely on my own opinion. Now, I have not read every horror book that's been put out in the past 25 years. So if I've missed one that you believe should be on the top 10, please let me know about it in the comments. I love connecting with viewers in the comment section, and I am always happy to get recommendations, just as I am always happy to give recommendations. Now, let's run the intro sequence, and I'll see you on the other side for a look at my top 10 horror books from the 21st century. Please help out the algorithm and give this video a like. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I do appreciate the support. If you would like to support the channel further, I do not have a Patreon account or anything like that. I am a writer. Presumably there are readers checking out this channel. The best way to support the channel would be to get yourself some of my books. Enjoy them, leave reviews. My most recent novel, Edifice Complex, Karim is losing his grip on reality when he develops an erotic codependent relationship with a residential building set for demolition. Edifice Complex, redefining what is meant by homesick. Available through Amazon as an ebook or paperback. I'll leave links in the description box. Now, I would like to share with you my top 10 list.
Shall we begin?
Only one book per author, otherwise this would be just another Adam Neville ranking, and I already have one of those. Let's get started. Kicking us off at number 10, The Troop by Nick Cutter from 2014. A Boy Scout troop is stuck on an island with a deadly virus. We've got excellent body horror and evil kid trope in a tight, expertly paced thrill of a read. With The Troop, Canadian author Craig Davidson kicked off his career, or turned his career around, and started producing horror books under the name Nick Cutter.
I could have kept doing it, but I grew up as a horror reader, you know, like in the 80s and 90s, as you said, like Barker, King, obviously, Kuntz, Robert R. McCammon, Anne Rice. Like I read so much horror. And so I just had this idea that wouldn't leave me alone. And I knew it was horror. And I remember when I sent it to my agent, you know, I wrote it like in a white heat, sort of it, I think maybe over 6 weeks or something. So he didn't even know I was doing it.
And this was The Troop.
And this is The Troop, yes. And so I
Okay.
sent it to him, and I sort of expect him to call me up and say, we are no longer on speaking terms.
Right.
You know, this is way outside of what I was going to represent you for.
The Troop, not exactly for the squeamish or the faint of heart, but for confirmed horror fans, I think it is a book that should not be passed up on. Next up at number 9, The Lonely Lands by Ramsey Campbell from 2023. A grieving man's attempt to comfort his wife in the afterlife comes at a high price in this highly inventive, emotionally impactful novel from one of the true masters of the craft. A great example of grief horror, The Lonely Lands can be appreciated on many levels. Fantasy horror, an exploration of magical thinking and how it can warp one's mind or one's perception of the world to terrifying extents. The psychological ramifications, often crippling ramifications, of superstition, or the unbearable weight of loss. There is a lot to like about The Lonely Lands, and I feel that it kind of passed under the radar when it was released, which is a shame, because I think it's one of the best horror books of the century, actually. Next up at number 8, Raw Blood by Catriona Ward, released in the US as The Girl from Raw Blood. Catriona Ward has to be on this list. She's put out 5 books. I've loved them all, but Raw Blood is my favorite. If you are looking for your next Catriona Ward read or your first, why not check out my ranking of her books? I think they're all great, but to varying degrees, of course. Raw Blood is historical fiction with several different timelines and several different POVs. Catriona Ward adjusts the writing style to fit each timeline, to fit each POV, so it is admittedly a challenging read, but when it all comes together at the very end, it simply blew my mind. Next up at number 7, World War Z, An Oral History of the Zombie War by Max Brooks from 2006. 10 years after the global zombie outbreak, a delegate from the United Nations travels the world to collect the testimony of survivors and how they survived and how they managed to fight off the zombies. I am constantly daydreaming about the zombie apocalypse. I'm constantly scoping out neighborhoods and identifying where I would hide out and where and how I would bunker down and fight back. This book was my daydreams brought to the page and done so expertly. We have survivors from various different backgrounds and with various different abilities and limitations. The standouts for me were the people in the submarine, the dog trainers, and the blind man in Japan. But every story, every survivor's account is compelling and gripping in this beautifully crafted work of horror. If you are a zombie fan or a survival enthusiast, you should definitely check out World War Z if you haven't already. Great book. Coming in at number 6, Cold Heart Canyon by Clive Barker from 2001. An action, fantasy, horror hybrid, Cold Heart Canyon opens with the assistant to a turn of the 20th century Hollywood star. He goes to Romania to purchase a monastery and has it shipped back to California, where it is rebuilt brick by brick to serve as the foundation for this star's mansion that she builds in one of the canyons outside of Hollywood. This mansion would go on to be the scene of legendary decadence, obscene orgies, and occult rituals. Decades later, a young Hollywood heartthrob stays in the mansion to hide out after a botched plastic surgery. There are horny animal-human hybrid ghosts. A mural depicting the victims of unfathomable cruelty comes to life. There is a lot to like in this book. I had a blast with it. Next up at number 5, Dr. Sleep by Stephen King from 2013. 25 years later, Mr. King gives us a sequel to his much celebrated The Shining. I had the benefit of reading this book first before I read The Shining, so my experience with Dr. Sleep did not suffer from comparisons with the original or any forms of nostalgia I might have had. And now having read both books, The Shining and Dr. Sleep, I have to admit that I much prefer Dr. Sleep. I know that's a controversial take. I have to be honest with you. I absolutely love this book. Danny Torrance, the son of an alcoholic, finds himself as an adult battling with alcoholism himself. Now, this part of the book, this really worked on me. I found the depiction of this very real struggle. I found it compassionate, realistic, and it was delivered, I think, with well-earned hopefulness that ultimately, I'll be honest with you, I found touching. Additionally, we have a band of spirit vampires. They go around the country hunting down people who possess this supernatural gift called The Shining. When they find them, they kill them and they inhale their essence. When this band of spirit vampires sets their sights on a little girl who possesses a high level of The Shining, the little girl, she teams up with Danny Torrance in an effort to stay alive, if not outright defeat this evil band. Dr. Sleep is a thick book that I ate up rather quickly, and I found the ending especially very satisfying. Next up at number 4, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay from 2015. Combining superstition and critical thinking, author Paul Tremblay manages to give us a compelling, tension-filled narrative that deals with the difficult subject of intense child abuse, which is an exorcism. However, unlike many other horror writers who have tried to tackle this subgenre, Paul Tremblay does so in a way that is not disrespectful to the many victims, and it does not require the reader to turn off their brains in order to enjoy the read. It is referential, at times tongue-in-cheek, at times a satire of pop culture, at times deeply serious when it depicts the desperation of a troubled mind and the harmful consequences when superstition supersedes reason. All of these varying tones work together beautifully in this impressive work. I had no business liking this book as much as I did. It is borderline YA. It is about an exorcism, two things I am particularly not receptive to. However, the execution of this book was excellent. I had a blast with it, thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, it's, I think, one of the best horror books of the 21st century, coming in at number 4. Next up at number 3, Brother by Anya Alborn from 2015. Deep in the heart of Appalachia stands a crooked farmhouse miles away from any road. The Morrows keep to themselves, and it served them well when girls go missing off the highway. The cops don't knock on their door, which is a good thing considering what is buried in the Morrows' backyard. Of the two Morrow brothers, 19-year-old Michael takes no pleasure in the screams that bellow from their basement home. In fact, he has met a lovely young girl from the nearby town, and he pines for her, just as he pines for a life of normalcy, a life free from the cruelty and bloodshed. However, his brother, Rebel, is all too eager to remind him of his place. Gritty, brutal, ultra-violent, and, surprisingly, with heart. Brother is an exceptional work of horror for confirmed horror fans only. Next up at number 2, The Reddening by Adam Neville from 2019. I could also include The Ritual, House of Small Shadows. Adam Neville has produced so many great works of horror in the past 25 years, but for me, The Reddening is my favorite. On an island off the coast of Devon, England, an archaeological discovery has us completely rethink what we know or what we think we know of our ancestors. Also on that island, a cult and the mythical red folk who are prepared to kill to keep their secret hidden. Hands down, the scariest book I have ever read.
There are some books I would consider a sequel to. I'd like to write a sequel to The Reddening.
I'll read it.
And I've thought of the story. That's the only one really that is starting to burn as a bit of an ambition.
I strongly recommend checking out his work if, for whatever reason, you haven't done so already. And closing out the top 10, coming in at number 1 as the best horror book to come out in the 21st century is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski from the year 2000. A story about a labyrinth that is presented as a labyrinth, which is a metaphor inside a metaphor, and so on. There are many, many layers to this delicious onion of a book. A satire of the media and our consumption of information. A story of loneliness and loss. At times it is laugh out loud funny. At times it is breathtakingly beautiful. And it has some legitimate scares as well. House of Leaves is a masterpiece. However, it is worth noting that it is not a traditional book. that should not be experienced in the traditional way a book is experienced. I do highly encourage horror fans to check it out. However, I would also caution them to read it slowly. Don't expect to tear through the 500 or so pages quickly like you would a more traditional novel. It took me a while to get into this. The first 80 or 100 pages or so were quite difficult going for me. But once I got the handle of it, I was sucked in and it blew my mind. What do you think of my top 10 list? Do you have any experience with the books or authors I talk about in this video? I want to know. I always enjoy connecting with you in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.